There's a mounting body of research on the area of discourse, discourse in learning. And so the discourse means when you talk about what you're doing, when you talk about what you are learning about. And the research seems to show that it's through these discussions where if you're holding an idea in your head, you think you know what's going on there, but you may have had the experience of you start to say something to somebody else, and partway through, you're kind of like, oh, wait a minute, you know what? Maybe this isn't such a good idea. It felt like a good idea in your head, and then you get it out into conversation, and immediately you can see, oops, there's some flaws with this strategy. Similarly, when you're engaged in a discussion with somebody and they bring up ideas that are they will bring up ideas that are kind of contrary to what you were thinking and challenge your position on this. It seems that when we're talking about things that are political, what happens is instead of listening to the other person and possibly changing our mind, we immediately find reasons to just demonize the other person and not change our minds. But in subjects that are not political, when people actually give some evidence or thought that is contrary to what we were thinking, very often in the context of these discussions, we change our mind. And ideally, we'd be able to do this in all contexts. But I'd say particularly in the United States right now, a lot of personal identity is wrapped around kind of an affiliation with one political party or another, and anything that kind of challenges that is really threatening to our personal identity, because we feel we'd be like letting down the entire group if I changed my mind about something. Turns out a long time ago, a lot of people changed their minds about a lot of things. But right now, the whole country is in lockstep with either this idea or this idea. Without kind of getting into how to change people's minds about political things, the idea in science is that that we should be regularly changing our minds about ideas and concepts based on the evidence that's in front of us. And it's through a discussion that a lot of the weaknesses in what I was thinking about come to light. And that ends up being a very powerful way for us to be able to change our minds and actually to fundamentally develop concepts and ideas in our heads. There's a body of thought that says that discourse is cognition, and cognition is discourse. So that through the process of our discourse, we form concepts in our head, and we actually have the ability to change our minds. If we look at the next generation science standards, science and engineering practices, two of these are explicitly engaging in discourse. So one of these is the idea of making arguments from evidence. So you are engaging in discourse with somebody else about evidence around an idea, as this is a fundamental thing that scientists do. And the other is about the importance of communicating, sort of not just to evaluate, but also to communicate scientific information. Again, engaging in discourse. So in the next generation science standards, two of those are very explicit about the importance of discourse in what we're doing. And as Emily and I were working on the book, How to Teach Nature Journaling, what we did is we built into every activity a portion at the end where you can engage in a discussion, in discourse, with other students who have participated in the activity, and we kind of wrap it around an idea or a concept. So we try to build that into each of our activities. And so I thought that it would be fruitful for us to talk today about the idea of discourse in two ways. One is, student to student or peer to peer, people who have engaged in a project, how much more we might be able to get out of that by, after doing a nature journaling activity, engaging in discourse around it about concepts and ideas and strategies that we encountered. The other is the idea of the journal page itself as discourse with yourself, as a way of getting your ideas out of your head and into another format on this piece of paper that you can then look back at and really be able to have more of a dialogue with yourself about what you're seeing and what you're thinking. This topic of discourse is becoming increasingly interesting in educational research. And I thought it would be really interesting and productive to throw it out to our community here, to, Rebecca gives this idea a thumbs up, to play with these thoughts and ideas. And wanted to find out if this sounds like fun, if anybody would like to just, kind of lead us out by, if there's something in this sort of discussion of discourse that resonates for you, either from your understanding of education, your personal experience, or your experience as a teacher, that you might be able to share with the group. So yeah, here's the idea. It's discourse, discuss.
Chris has got her hand up there.
Oh.
I can spotlight her.
Great.
There it is. Yeah, the Socratic Method is the beginning of most learning. And I think when you teach science, it's the beginning. It should be the heart of it, not just a little part of it. It's really important. That's all I have to say.
Yeah. And so, and can as you're, from your experience with the Socratic Method, just for people who aren't familiar with the term, let's just define that, and so that we all kind of are on the same level with the terms that we're using. That may not be.
Yeah, I'll paint a picture of students sitting with almost nothing in their hands, not just doing listening, and someone in a toga standing under a tree talking to them. And nothing happens unless they ask about it. So it's observing phenomena. I mean, from the very beginning, it's, I think there was something in the 80s or 70s, a science program that was based entirely on showing students short film clips that would interest them and ask a question without words, and then forced the students to come up with words to find out what it was. I cannot remember I think it was ISC of science, but it was bringing anything into the classroom that was going to cause the kids to develop a question. And it works beautifully with children. It doesn't work so well with adults. You can bring things in sometimes and present it, and they just sit there. There's fear. But with little kids, they'll ask.
Right. So you're looking at sort of the putting a really provocative phenomenon in front of students.
Right.
Let them come up with questions off of that and to engage with that. So instead of trying to fill in all the answers, you're using kind of getting a mystery into that. And your experience is that really that a mystery authentically pulls people into an exploration without a lot of teacher direction.
Absolutely. Well, teacher direction possibly, but not a lot of materials, not a lot of hoopla. It cannot be tested so well what happens, except that people start to open up and talk about things and see things from someone else's point of view or search for answers. It puts more responsibility on the learner, which is what I think we're lacking. We go into classrooms where everything's provided, and the responsibility of the learner is to just follow directions. You know.
Great. Thank you, Chris. I see Kate also has
Gotcha.
either to add, extend on that.
Yeah, and I read a great quote the other day. I wish I could remember it, like who said it, but the quote was basically, education is not filling a bucket, it is sparking a fire. And so that's the whole point of discourse, is so that we're sparking that fire and we're communicating back and forth. Too often education is thought of as being passive. The idea of students sitting there and the guy in the toga saying, here, this is what you need to know. And I think that's part of the problem. And I think that's also why you can't discuss politics, because it's not discourse, it becomes arguments. I'm right, you're wrong. I'm right, it does not blend it. And it's because we haven't been taught how to disagree with one another without it being combative.
Yeah.
How to productively disagree. That's interesting, because and I think that for part of that is if fundamentally you're not willing to change your mind about something, then it is just this sort of like, it's debate club, and you're going to have your turn, my turn, we're going to see who wins.
More rules.
But if you are able to engage with something and pull at it from a bunch of different directions, unless you're really not paying attention, you should emerge from that process changed. Because, you know, right now we could pick any topic and probably everybody in this forum right here would have a slightly different angle on it. And if by engaging in that, you happen to be the one who was right? Statistically, that's unlikely. Right?
Yeah.
So if we're not regularly changing our minds about things, we're not paying attention.
Right. Yep. And very few things are right or wrong. Very few things are right or wrong. I think discussion leads to the full gamut of the color of how things are made up of.
Right. Yeah, things are right and wrong given a specific set of rules. But the problem with being a human being is there is no specific set of rules. Right. So let's jump over to Mrs. Dawson. Ms. Dawson? And
thank you. Hi. So I love this. This is great, because inquiry-based learning is so incredibly important with students, and getting them to ask questions is, for me it's like pulling teeth, trying to get my students to ask questions, because they don't want to be wrong and they don't want to sound stupid, right? That is like the biggest fear that so many of my kids are encountering. And now, so what I used to do, I love that you mentioned the Socratic Method. I used to teach Socratic seminars with some of my older kids, which is where you teach questioning strategies explicitly and give it some structure, and they can sit in a circle and have a discourse with a little bit of structure within these boundaries, and you end up doing it for a grade, and it teaches those questioning skills. However, what I want to pose to the group is, what are we doing with distance learning? Because doing a Socratic seminar and having these discussion-based conversations are really, really important. But I cannot get my kids to talk in class. I can't even get them to turn on their cameras. Like they're scared, you know. And I'm wondering if anybody has some strategies for how to prompt that inquiry and maybe get over the hump of shyness for the kiddos during this distance learning time.
That is a brutal question.
I know, it's tough.
So we're looking at kind of the importance of discourse and engaging around ideas. The mechanics of that are more difficult in in a Zoom context, although you'll notice we are having a conversation here in this.
We are.
But if there gets to be a culture in the Zoom classroom of sort of passivity, then it's safe for everybody just to sit behind the muted mic and watch. And be a consumer of the experience rather than a participant.
I'm seeing folks mention in the chat the Jamboard. I haven't used Jamboard, but I saw some people use it, and it looks like something like a collaborative tool for discussion, right?
Yeah, it is.
I just used my first Jamboard about a week ago, and I was impressed. If you imagine a blank wall and you have a bunch of Post-it notes in your hands, and there's a question that's on the table, and you're writing things on Post-it notes and putting them in different places, and then maybe you're taking this Post-it note and moving it over to there, or drawing a line between this Post-it note and that Post-it note. That's a form of brainstorming that is used in some meeting contexts. The Jamboard is the virtual version of that. You have your block of Post-it notes. You're writing things off. You're placing them in different places. And then you can see everybody else's. That might be a very effective way of initially doing something. Because I find the same thing, that in a Zoom meeting, it is like right now, there are several people who want to say something in this conversation. And right now I'm monopolizing the screen and nobody wants to interrupt me, right? So they're all quiet. And then their time passes and they're thinking, well, oh, that was relevant just a little while ago, right? So,
Yeah.
So I'll jump in and say that with the Jamboard, I've introduced that, and I've had did examples of putting a nature journal page on there, and then putting the Post-its and showing the students like the safe and easy way to give feedback. So if you set it up and give the example and show that it's not that threatening, I think that could be helpful, maybe with older kids. I know that it is a problem with kids not wanting to turn on their video, and I have a teenager who has a hard time too. Their school makes it so that everyone has to have their video on. They don't have to be staring at the screen, but it just has to be on. And when they break up into smaller groups, they feel safer to have conversation. So if you have smaller groups, and I think it'll just depend on the dynamic of your class level and what you've already kind of scaffolded in leading conversations. But I think that, at least from a teenager standpoint, it's really hard to just, well, maybe it's every kid, right? It's hard to jump into conversation. You're staring at 25 other faces that maybe you haven't even met because you've been online. So in order to break that up, maybe practice bringing them into breakout rooms or the smaller groups in Google, whatever platform you're using, and then teaching them how to give feedback. Jack talks about feed forward, which I really love. And it's not about, you did this right or you did this wrong, but really like looking at how can we as the teachers model what kind of comments we want the children to be putting into their collaborative workspaces.
That's really helpful. Hey, Chris, could I get you to make a little bit of a comment about what you're saying about your experience with breakout rooms and
sure
questions?
Yeah, so I have, for example, I have a class this semester that's just a straight lecture and nobody talks. There's 100 students in the class and nobody sees each other. The only person whose video is on is the professor, whereas they all have the option to turn on their video. But I'm also in another class that has maybe 50 students in it. And when the professor breaks us into groups, after giving us some topic and some little activity to work on, we usually all turn on our videos, and by the time we get out of those breakout rooms, the full class, most people have their videos on, which is a lot more engaging. It's a lot more exciting to see everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a 7-year-old and 9-year-old, and I've noticed in the last week or in the last week or so, their classes have started doing more breakout sessions on their Zoom. And I'm even just as an observer, I'm seeing so much more engagement with them, that they're, instead of just staring at the screen all day, they're having conversations and they're engaging. And it's also been really good for them because when they're in a group with, you know, like 3 other kids or a small group, one of them or each of them really are taking turns sort of leading that conversation, and they get a feel for, in our Zoom world, what it's like to be a leader of a Zoom meeting when you can't see everybody else around you. And, you know, I mean, there's a whole dynamic to Zoom meetings, virtual meetings, and leading them. And so they're getting experience with that as well.
Yes.
And I saw a hand up a moment ago. So those are some useful strategies, Ms. Dawson. For those might be some good things. With certain age groups, when you are breaking out into breakout rooms, you need to. If kids just go into those, I've watched my own daughter's classes where when the teacher their computer system gets disconnected, and all of a sudden, you know, there is no supervision in the class and all the rest of the kids are there, there is mayhem and chaos. But so establishing some discussion norms is, I think, very helpful and important. So to make it really clear for when we do go into breakout rooms, what do we expect of people's behavior, and that can be, you know, talking about that you have a responsibility if you have some information to share that with the group. You also have a responsibility not to dominate the group. There is a, I think it would be, if you look at statistics on participation in science discussions from girls, you see that the older we get in our schooling, that participation goes way, way, way down. And so what is happening is that half of the good ideas in the classroom are being turned off. And to have some open discussions about those sorts of things with students before people are kind of in breakout rooms may be a good strategy, so that males can look at themselves and say, am I just dominating here? Do I want to do more? Am I being as good a listener as I am at being sharing? And realize that both of those are really important skills. Because for boys, we're not trained how to listen. We're trained to go do something, go do it. And you feel like you're not really on task unless you are actively doing it. Notice, as example, my dominating this conversation right now, right? Typical sort of male trait. Interesting to observe. Amy.
I have the coolest example of how women and girls can really contribute to conversations and bring new ideas to leadership and science and lots of aspects of life. I was taking a sea turtle class back in May, virtually, and see, you're dominating the conversation with your phone now. No, I'm kidding. Okay, so I was taking a sea turtle class, and they had a couple of guest speakers. There were 2 women that were studying sea turtles, and they were trying to figure out how to put the tags on the turtles and get them to stick there, because the top layers of the turtle shell kind of sloughs off some. And so and because it was 2 women, and I'm being sexist when I say this, they said, hey, you know what? You know how you get those those acrylic nails put on, and they'll stay on for a very long time. We need to go down to the nail salon and ask the lady that does our nails and ask her what she uses. So maybe that will keep these trackers on the back, the radio trackers on the back of the turtles. And so they did that and had really great success with that. And you know, like I said, I'm being a little sexist to say this, but I think that's something that women could bring to it, a different way of looking at things. You know, that like most men don't go to the nail salon to have their nails done. So, you know, I thought that was really, really neat how they had a fresh new perspective of, you know, something that's just ordinary and everyday for a lot of women, and they brought that into the science.
Yeah, it is, you know, half of the good, half of the ideas that we engage with should come from half of the population, right? And if half of the population gets sort of progressively silenced, then we are really doing ourselves culturally a lot of damage. And to those individuals who are silenced, it's also damaging. So just saying that, you know, in our breakout rooms, having some discussion norms, and the idea that we can disagree with each other and struggle with an idea, and that if through that struggle you change your mind, you have not lost, is really important, and really valuable. Most of the, if you kind of look around sort of culturally at sort of, let's take political lack of discourse. A lot of people just, they listen to talk radio, right? And they'll tune into a radio station where there will be somebody who has a rather extreme point of view, and they're angry, and they are able to sort of, you know, spit out a lot of venom, and they can, anybody who disagrees with them, they have their finger on a button where they can silence that person. If that person starts to make an articulate point that challenges their own worldview, you'll see them silence those people, use an ad hominem attack, and then move on to the next caller. Ideally, somebody who then is somebody who, again, agrees with the talk show host, so they can give an appearance of, we're all in this together. Wasn't that other person crazy? But that is, so we're used to seeing people arguing. We're not used to seeing people engaging in discourse, engaging in a conversation, the goals of which are to clarify our ideas and to move us to a better idea, to allow us to change our minds, you want to kind of put up the best challenges to your ideas. And if your ideas stand up to those, that's great. And if they don't, that's great. But that's not sort of the general way that we think about these things.
So I was encouraging in the chat for those of you who have like a new idea that's not being discussed to jump in and put your voice into the group, because during the recording, a lot of people watch these because some people are in different time zones and can't attend live, and they miss out on your wonderful input that you're putting into the chat box right now. So those of you who are here live, 24 of us can see those chats or save the chat. But if you are comfortable, want to jump in and just put your 2 cents in, that would be really awesome, so that everyone can get a chance to hear you. And I'll also put in there, for me personally, it's really hard to read all of these messages and listen to the person speaking. So if you could maybe think about what you're typing and say, can I just say this, you know, in 2 minutes in a quicker way so that everyone can hear, so that we're not distracting people from the person who's actually speaking. That's just kind of what popped up, because I don't want to miss anything in the chat, but at the same time, I'm not listening to whoever's talking when I do that. So just thought I'd put it out there.
All right. Let's take some folks who've been dropping some hot topics into the chat. Just kind of pop on with us, if you would, and share some of those jewels.
I was going to say, the last idea that you had with the separating the boys and the girls so that the woman can get to learn discourse without being suppressed by their male counterparts. I think that's a cool idea, but it could also be kind of problematic for, like, it opens the stage for people who are not like on the gender binary to be discriminated against, you know, especially if a instructor doesn't respect, for example, someone's chosen or someone's gender. And yeah, and also maybe an alternative could be having, like, assigning people leadership roles in certain conversations so that not only do the boys get to learn discourse from the woman, but you know what I mean? And they can learn from each other. And you know, there's also a lot of shy guys too who could learn from their other male counterparts.
I like what you're saying there, Chris. That we do need to learn how to kind of be doing this together. And if we are, as a sort of, if your initial strategy is to separate boys, girls, you're right, that that does then leave out everybody who their identity isn't as clearly defined as that. Thank you very much for dropping that into the conversation. Let's jump to, I see there's several hands. We're not, I see we've got the raise hand function. I'm going to jump over to Amy here. And if you would please, there we go. You can, there you go.
I think there were two Amy's, so I didn't know if it was me. But I just wanted to put in my 2 cents. Thank you so much for leading this conversation, because I feel like we're talking not just about teaching nature journaling, but about just how to be with each other. And so this is a lot bigger conversation, I feel like, that I can apply to so many other places as well. And to try to teach my students how to do that too is just a great reminder. And I'm a Charlotte Mason teacher, homeschooler, but I also teach biology for a little group of homeschool high school students. And one thing that I just learned this weekend at a conference was, or not learned, but remembered, that just having that humility, especially as a teacher, to not just be the show or fill in all the answers and, you know, just be the draw, but to really let the students explore, discover, and to have the humility as a teacher to let them take that leadership and the ownership of what they're learning too. And then just also, again, just the humility in discussing, to be able to receive what somebody else is saying and, you know, have your own thoughts changed by somebody else's perspective. So I think what I'm saying is, I love this conversation. So not anything new, just wanted to say thank you. So.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Amy. This is we are. I love what you said about kind of bringing the idea of humility on the part of the teacher. The old model of you're an empty vessel. I pull off. Here's my. Where's? Oh, here we go. The old model is that you, as the teacher, you rip off the top of the head, and you pry this open, and you stuff in as much new data into this thing as you can, and then you're going to kind of somehow seal it up again, and that is how education worked, right? But it doesn't work that way, because when you get in here, this is already full. There are fully formed concepts and ideas in here. If you're trying to jack something in here, that's going to get popped out because the stuff that's already in here has dibs. And it's through that you have to kind of allow the conversation to kind of get into and engage with what is already here, and on the terms of what is here, to encounter those ideas, grapple with them, and that's going to happen at the pace of this brain that's already here. And so you're right. If I, as a teacher, I'm thinking I'm just going to jam my thoughts in there, it's not going to work. That the way that this changes is through the act of discourse. And that is, it's more hands off. You can guide a discussion and be there as helpful, but actually this brain has to be engaging with that. So I love what you said about humility on the part of the teacher.
Just you using the visual of the brain helped me see it too, and all the little folds and everything. So thank you for even just showing that.
Absolutely. I find that, you know, having my own skull and brain as an educator, especially when I'm teaching about growth mindset and things, I end up pulling this guy out a million times. And the other times it just sort of sits around in my studio as a little memento mori. That's fun to have. Yeah, you can get them online. This was that was my Christmas present 2 years ago, and it was really fun.
So Jack, there are 3 people that have their little blue hands raised, waiting.
Great.
I'm not sure if you can see them
Let's jump over first to Sharon. And Sharon, thank you so much for being with us.
Hi. The reason I wanted to jump in was today I had listened to a podcast. It was in the Hidden Brain series, and the title is Moral Combat. And although it's kind of referring to people digging in on positions related to, you know, that they believe they hold the moral high ground about that issue. But it was a wonderful conversation about how people's minds can be changed, and that it requires a discussion for that to occur. So I think that applies significantly to what we're talking about today, although it was related more to our current political situation. But I think, you know, as a teacher, we can probably use some of the concepts in that podcast to help us be, as Amy was saying, a little bit more humble about our own positions, and be open to, you know, more sharing and incorporating the ideas of many people into what is presented. So that's about all I have to say.
Again, that was the Hidden Brain podcast, and the name of the one you're looking at.
The particular episode was called Moral Combat.
I like that, Moral Combat. Good. I will add that to my to-do list. When this workshop ends, that's going to be the first thing I'm going to do. I'm going to go engage in moral combat there. Thank you.
Well, don't get bruised while you're at it.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's jump over to Kate. And
hi there. I'm not going to get too much on a soapbox because I have a problem with the way that we're being told to teach by and large. But somebody said it in the chat room earlier that this is something we need to teach children starting at an early age. I was a kindergarten teacher for a long time, and there were a few things we did, and one of the things is that the kids would have like little name badges that had a symbol on one corner. Maybe it was a triangle, it would be a shape, it would have a number, it would have a letter, and it would have a color. And throughout the day they would have they would have to find the people who had the same letter or same whatever. So it was kind of their own little breakout rooms. This was in real time, of course, and they would sit and they would have a question to go over. And sometimes it was just to get them to speak. And I would kind of pop around the room to find out what they were talking about. I tried to encourage them to listen and ask them if they couldn't tell me what their partners were saying. So at least they were paying a little bit of attention. But really, discourse needs to be taught as something. And we spend so much time trying to get them to remember things for state testing that we don't spend enough time on those
they're called social skills, but we don't spend time on them. And the social skills are really the foundation for so much learning later on.
I want to encourage you to get on your soapbox here. This is a perfect place for your soapbox, and the experience of a teacher who's been in the trenches as long as you have, we really do want to hear.
Yeah, right. We're spending a lot of time trying to get kids to take tests that measure what they've learned, but all we've asked them to do is regurgitate. We've not asked them to explain what they've learned. We're not asking them to make opinions. We're not asking, a few weeks back, we talked about Bloom's taxonomy, I believe. And we're not asking them for anything higher than the most basic level of Bloom's taxonomy. And I understand, you know, it's very hard to assess and have massive assessments with that. But somehow or other, we need to get back to to a more complete understanding of things. And the Common Core standards in and of themselves aren't bad, but the way we test those standards really stinks.
We have turned part of our education system into a culture of testing, even in some places where teachers are rewarded and schools are punished based on test scores, giving some just artificial power and strength to those metrics. Since no test left behind, this is
Thank
really
you. Good way to put it.
This has been what we've seen a lot of education. Shout out to some of our homeschool educators who have broken away from this, and other educators who, even within those confines and in those constraints, fighting against that. But there's a lot of institutional lag, and that's hard. I wanted to drop another idea in that ties to what Kate was talking about, these little groups kind of going off and having a discussion there. Similar to when there's a breakout room, then people are going to be more engaged. A lot of people, when you ask a question, this is also true for people with who are English language learners, but also true for people who are fluent in the language. Some people, when a question gets dropped on them, they need some time just to kind of ruminate around it and to think about it. And there are some kids who, when you ask a question, they've got an answer and they're ready to go. And so those people, those hands go up. You ask a question, those hands go up. And you probably have done this in your classrooms, where you ask a question and then you do the wait thing. You just ask a question and all the immediate hands go up, and then you wait. And as long as you're comfortable with that dead air time, which is even harder to do on Zoom, right? Then these other hands go up, and then all of a sudden, like a watered lawn, all of a sudden, boop, 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 boop. All these other little hands go up because people just needed more time to think about it. And then you can be able to ask of people who weren't able to sort of do that immediately. In addition to the kind of ask the question and wait strategy, there is what's called the think, pair, share approach to wrangling with questions, where you ask a question. You want, I guess, everybody, I want you just to think about this and just get out a piece of paper, and I want you to write down on your piece of paper 1 or 2 ideas that you have about that. I want everybody, let's go do that right now. Okay, so everybody's writing down their little ideas. And then what you do is you say, now I want you to take a turn and with a partner, and you're going to discuss their ideas with them and your ideas. You're going to discuss your ideas with them and their ideas with you. You guys are going to have a discussion about those, and the pair of people kind of get a chance to bat these ideas back and forth. Like, what did you say that was different than mine? What did I say that was different than you? Why do you think that is? And these sorts of things. And you give them some, again, ground rules for discourse on those. And then you can turn it out to kind of an open classroom discussion. And you say, like, so in that, were there any ideas that came up to you or that you heard your partner say that, or even a fusion of what you and your partner were thinking about, that you think you want to share with the classroom? And then there's like, boop, 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 all these little hands everywhere. You got like this little, sea of hands that are sharing things. because you're then not just rewarding the people who are able to immediately do this. That is more challenging on a Zoom platform, but is also kind of for kind of getting discourse going. Another a very important way of doing this. Let's go to Avea. Good to see you. And thank you for being with us today. What are your thoughts?
Okay, so what I have are more two questions, and they're both related to discussion skills, I guess you could say. So the first one, kind of going back a little bit, when we were talking about, you know, having conversations and then the way that sometimes people are scared to jump in, I thought maybe it'd be helpful, could we maybe brainstorm what different skills somebody can use when they're trying to speak up or get their point heard? Because I think that sometimes people don't always know how to do it. Like there's sometimes where we'll try to like find the perfect stopping point to jump in, but then maybe we don't know the rhythm. Or we can use the raising the hand feature on Zoom, but I know sometimes the teacher can't always see it if they're sharing screen. So that's one thing, like maybe brainstorming different ways that people can jump into the conversation while still being polite without like totally interrupting. And then the other thing, oh God, okay, now I have to remember what the other thing was. Oh, wait, I remember. What exactly are skills to healthy disagreements? Like, this is gonna sound weird, but is there like a list somewhere where they talk about strategies? Like, you know how they have the fallacious argument list? Is there like a healthy discussion type list that's the opposite of that? And that's all my questions.
Oh, awesome.
Healthy disagreement.
You can just go do a quick Google search right now for discussion norms. Discussion norms, and you put that in, and you'll see norms for the different programs have used, and you'll see a lot of similarities between them. You'll see that there isn't, you know, one master list, but you will see a lot of things that you'll see a lot of crossover from a lot of different teachers' classrooms as you go through these, and as you go through them, you can sort of pick out what that looks like, and actually taking some time and practicing these sorts of things is useful. Also, kids love role play about doing bad behavior. That's fun to do. So if you do that, you kind of look through those. Might be interesting just to ask people, as you take a look through discussion norms that you're seeing in these different lists, are there any there that really stand out to you and that you think would be challenging for yourself or for your students? Or maybe what we could do is maybe to get us started, because some people are not able to kind of see those lists online. Maybe somebody could read out some of those that are relevant to us. Victoria's
also popped it into the chat. If those of you who have chat, you can see there's a list.
Okay. Let's jump. While we're doing that, I'm going to jump over here to Victoria. Maybe her comment is on this topic. If not, we'll circle back to it after what Victoria says. Hi there, Victoria. Thank you for being with us.
Hi there. Thanks so much. It's a pleasure to join. I wouldn't say I have a direct response immediately to the discussion norms, but I find from time to time it's in conflicts and discussions that have been heated in my life, really the breath has been the biggest tool for myself. I can't guide anybody in deep breathing if we're having a heated discussion, but that always tends to take my tempo and my heated pulse or speedy thoughts down a notch, and usually that break puts a bit of reflection and respect for your own opinions and the other person's. I had some other things, but we can get back to that after we talk about discussion norms.
Okay. Let's drop in a few other discussion norms, and then we'll circle back with you, Victoria, before we wrap this conversation. So Victoria's mentioned one thing that's really important, and you actually see that sort of, I see some things that can be kind of a version of that on some of the discussion norms that I'm seeing listed on different teachers' pages. She mentioned the idea of doing breathing, intentional breathing, when you feel your pulse quickening. Another way that that can come up is that before you speak is just to pause, and before you speak, just do a couple of intentional breaths and then begin to speak. So once you have the floor, you don't need to immediately go. And a teacher who's facilitating, really making it clear to people that now is your turn and it's not going to get taken away if words aren't spilling out immediately, can help with that. And also what I love about what Victoria was suggesting there is the idea of the importance of self-monitoring. So programs which help kids understand their feelings and their emotional responses to things. They can realize, oh, I'm feeling frightened, I'm feeling intimidated, I'm feeling scared, I'm feeling angry. And that is, if you don't want your system to get hijacked by fight or flight, to be able to notice that, breathe your way through it, and then you are in a place where you're much better able to play with ideas. Can somebody share with us a few other ideas that they're seeing as discussion norms that you think were going to be really critical? I'm going to jump over to Sharon right here, and we'll take a few of these, and then we're going to go back to Victoria. So Sharon, thank you.
Hi. I recently retired as a lecturer at University of Michigan, so I found this information from the Center for Research on Learning and Teaching from the University of Michigan. And so some of the norms for discussion are that individuals need to listen respectfully. You need to be open to changing your perspectives based on what you learn from others.
That's huge.
Everyone in the group needs to understand that we are bound to make mistakes as we're carrying on these conversations, and that our words have effects on others. So that's why we especially need to be respectful. They also suggest that when you're working in pairs or in small groups, you do that work seriously, that it's not goof off time, that you understand that others will come into discussions with totally different experiences from yours. And so they may have a perspective that will enlighten you, that you need to make an effort to know other students and introduce yourself to other students that you don't know, so that you can gain perspective from them, and that you need to understand that there are different approaches to solving problems. So I often think of the physics courses that I took, and I could come to the same answer that my study buddies would, but we solved it in completely different ways. So these are some guidelines from University of Michigan Center for Research and Learning on Learning and Teaching. So I thought it was helpful.
That's very helpful, Sharon. Thank you. Does anybody see other, as you're looking through other lists of discussion norms, or from your own personal experience, discussion norms that you find particularly useful or are phrased in a way that students can understand? And what does that look like? Again, our best way of doing this right now is
just let you know that Miss Dawson put in a really great link to, I just clicked on it, it has a nice graphic that's like sketchnoted. It's really easy to see, and I think that might be a really great model for us to use as teachers to create something for the classroom to help everyone be on the same page. So it's not just words, but has little icons, and it's kind of cool and simple and easy to use. It's the Toolbox project, and there's a page in there that has 12 tools for learning, tools for life, with a little icon.
Miss Dawson, would you be able to, for people who are watching this on a recording afterwards, just sort of tell us a few of the things that you're seeing on that sheet that are particularly useful? Again, this is the Toolbox Project.
Sure. So this is, I don't run this project myself. This is developed by a couple other folks in Berkeley, but my school has adopted it for, we're a small middle school. And basically it's just giving, it's literally called a toolbox because it's teaching kids how to have tools to have effective, not just effective discussions, but how to deal with overwhelming emotions as well. So it's a social emotional learning tool. Let me pull up the page so I can like look at it. We've done the breathing tool so far, and that's oh, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, but the nice woman who brought up deep breathing. We do actually teach that to kids, and it can be taught. I think it has to be taught with, you know, give it some honesty and like really be into it if you're going to teach it, because kids get really squirmy and don't like to sit down and breathe and, you know, want to scoff at it. But you know, there's ways to go about setting up that discussion so that kids can take it a little bit more seriously. There's a listening tool, an empathy tool, personal space tool. There's a bunch of them. There's a bunch of them, but I haven't gone through all of them yet. The only one I've actually taught yet thus far is the breathing tool. But I really like the model because I think that nowadays, in at least California, the schools that I've been working in have been pushing towards incorporating more social emotional learning into curriculum. But that was not the case when I was in school, and that probably wasn't in the case when a lot of people were in school. It was like education only. But learning those tools is going to make facilitating like the acquisition of knowledge much easier if kids can also have these social emotional tools at their disposal. And it helps them in all sorts of situations. So yeah, if you're interested in the Toolbox Project, I do have the name somewhere in my email of the woman who runs it, and I can like post that and get people connected. Otherwise, we can just look at the graphic. But then I have to leave because I have to go back to work.
Ms. Dawson, thank you so much for being with us, and thank you so much for sharing this. So people can look up the Toolbox Project online for a place to get more information about general social emotional learning strategies. My daughters were exposed to the Toolbox system, and it really worked well for them. Because what it does is it's not just like you need to do some deep breathing there, but they actually have hand motions that go along with it. So for instance, for the breathing tool, their tool is a tape measure, and you imagine holding a tape measure and pulling the thing out and letting it go. And then you pull the tape measure out and let it go. And so the kids are breathing in and breathing in. And so they do the hand motions. And so you'll see these students in the class, everybody's been exposed to this, and you know, something is getting heated, and on the playground, all of a sudden, like, kid is doing this. And everybody knows what's going on, and it works. My daughters, when we would be doing this at home, and you know, they'd take something and they would put it in the trash can. They're going to let the little things go, and so there's a kinesthetic cue to all of these strategies. It's a really slick system. I think that's very useful. Ms. Dawson, thank you so much for bringing that up.
Yeah.
And thank you also for being with us on the call here, even though and now you have to run off to your class. It is, by the way, 1:04, and we're going to be wrapping up soon. Before we do, I would like to return to Victoria and give her a chance to share her thoughts.
Thanks, Jack. I'll see if I can wrap it up in my own head, because there's just so many great ideas and perspectives on this. And gosh, I wish when I went to school when I was a little girl, and even in university, that these kinds of skills were taught, because I think many of us perhaps grew up in the very fill that head up with all the knowledge, and don't give your peers the space. It's a matter of fighting to get your voice out there. And some people simply don't have that fight in them. And well, it might be a good thing they don't, because they have other skills. And from a personal experience, I was a kid who took a long time to learn things and was deemed having a learning disability. But that was, I needed time. And I now in our conversation can put myself in I can try to imagine how it would have been differently. And I think it's great that Zoom is actually pushing this envelope of how we ought to teach or learn. What I want to say about that is that it's curious, how do you find the space, and how are you able to be giving that attention to the kids that are doing Zoom class? How can you notice that somebody is having a hard time to get to the plate to say something? The breakout sessions I think is a great solution, but there's nuances that are so much more subtle than that being in a classroom, you can see, you can sense whatever it is, the body language of one of the kids that's perhaps struggling. And I think I'd like to end with that question of what is so subtle that you can't even see it in a breakout group of somebody needing a bit of extra support. How do you see that, and how do you address that?
I think that ending our discussion here on a really provocative question is a good way to do it. That is a beautiful thought. I want to encourage people in this group to consider that and to roll it around, and perhaps that's where we will start off from next week. Are you going to be with us next week, Victoria?
I sure would like to. This is my first time joining the Educators Forum, and I think this is just wonderful. So yeah, sure, I'll be here.
This is how we roll. I look forward to seeing everybody back here next week. And I think that this maybe is a discussion that we really should continue. So we will begin with that when we meet again. It's interesting, today we started with the idea of discourse and the importance and value of being able to get ideas out of your head and to engage them with other people. And that brought us directly into analyzing social emotional learning. Something that I find very powerful about journaling itself is that it allows for a real element of self-reflection. And that can be built into what you do in your nature journaling. If you're looking out at the world and you're doing, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, in your journal, and then you take that same process and you turn it back towards yourself and you do, I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, and investigate your own feelings and your thoughts and your own connections about whatever it is that you're doing. That's going to help you also bring that piece of social emotional learning to your practice of journaling. There's a lot of research that shows that people who keep a diary are more emotionally intelligent than people who don't. So these are skills that we can develop, and the Nature Journal can be also a platform for developing those social emotional skills. It then gets to a whole new level when we're working as educators and we're working with a group of students in a class, trying to bring them together towards that goal. So thank you all for joining in this discussion, and we really look forward to continuing this the next time we meet. Thank you. Take care, be kind, make art in nature, and be safe out there, folks. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you so much. Y'all take
Thank
care.
you, Jess.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jack.
all.
Always good to see you too.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Rebanto, it's really good to see you again, my friend. Take care.